Hey y'all, and welcome to Politibrawl. My name is Brian, and Tom Homan sounds off on these reporters, giving out detail by detail of what exactly is happening with Tren de Agua and what Trump is doing to protect American citizens. Let's dive in.
Could you walk us through just some of the behind the scenes on how you carried out some of the deportation of the flights from being invoked under the Alien Enemies Act? How did that play out behind the scenes? And can you get a little to the timing of the judge's order?
Look, let me say this. The president, through proclamation, took his authority under Alien Enemies Act and imposed it, which he has the right to do. TDA has been designated terrorist organizations. TDA is an enemy of this country. We know TDA, based on a lot of evidence, are part of the Maduro regime through the military and law enforcement. They've infiltrated them, and look, they've invaded this country to unsettle this country, through whether it's through fentanyl killing thousands of Americans or through the violence they're perpetrating in our cities. The president did the right thing. I stand by it. I thought we removed in one day over 200 dangerous people, including MS-13. It was the right thing to do. And I see the video that President Bukele put out. It's a beautiful thing. These people are going to be held accountable.
Is every one of those guys a member of the gang? How do you know it, and why can't they sort that out with a lawyer and a hearing?
Look, we abided by the court's decision. His written order was on 5 illegal aliens. They didn't want to deport them, and we abided by that. By the time the other order came, the plane was already over international waters with a plane full of terrorists and significant public safety threats. And, to turn a plane around over international waters, we're going to refuel over international waters, come back and bring terrorists back to the United States. That's not what this president promised American people. What the president did was exactly the right thing.
So they're all Tren de Agua, every guy who's on that plane?
I'm not familiar with every single case in that plane, but that's my understanding. MS-13 members and TDA members. And let's remember, many of those on the plane were removed through Title 8, not through the Alien Enemies Act. So again, it was the right thing to do. That's what the people of this country mandated President Trump deal with the border crisis, deal with illegal immigration, and deal with illegal alien crime, and that's exactly what we did. We removed terrorists. That should be a celebration. We removed terrorists from this country, and I stand by what the president did. I support 100%.
How do you determine whether somebody is a gang member? What criteria do you use?
To various investigations. A lot of the ways we do it, law enforcement sensitive. I'm not going to share all that with you, but whether through social media, through the activities, through their criminal records here and abroad. So this was done a very. The review of this issue was at the highest level I've seen, and I think, again, I stand by everything we did this weekend, and I think the president keeping his promise to the American people. We removed terrorists from the country this weekend. I can't believe any media would question the president's ability to remove terrorists from this country.
But what do you say to those who say what do you say to those who claim you're using a 200-year-old law to circumvent due process?
An old law? Not as old as the Constitution. We still pay attention to that, don't we?
But some would say this is...
How many more terrorists do you plan on deporting?
And he's right, because what the Trump administration is basing this on is the Alien and Sedition Acts, which were a set of 4 acts that were passed in 1798 underneath the John Adams Federalist administration. Now, I am not a big fan of all of those laws, particularly the 4th one, that basically says that you can't use your First Amendment rights. I'm not a big fan of that. The other 3, on the other hand, I am a big fan of. And the Alien Enemies Act is one of those first 3 acts. And so Donald Trump has used a 1798 law in order to deport people who have quite literally been enemies of the United States while here on American soil and who aren't actually American citizens. This is a perfectly legal idea, but it hits a small legal roadblock, and it's the reason that this activist judge decided at the 11th hour, when this plane was leaving the United States, to take away these dangerous criminals to El Salvador. This dude worked in conjunction with the ACLU and gave a verbal order to get the plane back. Well, I'm sorry, is the verbal order the same as a written order? That's one of the big questions the Trump administration is asking, not just of the old Biden regime that has been swept away, thank the Lord, and now we have a question of legality. Is a verbal order the same as a written order, and is the autopin order considered legitimate when the president might not have actually known what was going on? Now, that's another topic for another day, but the verbal order thing, that's going to be huge in an upcoming legal debate. And thus, if you are using legal precedent to basically move illegal migrants here in the United States, there's nothing that can stop you. There's nothing that can stop the president. So I don't think this is going to go too far. I don't think this is going to reach the Supreme Court. But this is a pretty interesting case all along. And so this is what Donald Trump did on March 15th. The U.S. deported hundreds of immigrants after President Donald Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act for the first time since World War II, using the sweeping powers of a centuries-old wartime law to target alleged members of a Venezuela gang. The deportations over the weekend came as a federal judge issued an order temporarily barring them. So I've gone over most of that pretty much here. Allows. Wow, the editor did not take a look at this. Attaboy, AP. I guess that's the best we can expect from you, isn't it? The act allows non-citizens to be deported without the opportunity to go before an immigration or federal court judge. Trump's Saturday proclamation called the Tren de Aragua gang an invading force, and I believe he is perfectly right to do so. Tren de Agua has too many ties to not just Venezuela, but to an arguably illegal regime under Maduro, who is basically a dictator over there in Venezuela. Things aren't going too well there. And need I remind you that it was a violent Venezuelan migrant who had been released from prison, who had committed violent crimes in New York City, and instead of being detained there, managed to catch another humanitarian flight back to Atlanta, Georgia, where he met up with some friends in Athens, Clark County, where Laken Riley was a nursing student at the University of Georgia, and he took her life. So, there is a problem here. We have a problem with Venezuelan migrants who have been released into the United States who might be a part of their prison system, and they said, go to the United States and cause as much havoc as you can. Just get out of here. Well, we are now taking the violent criminals who are here illegally, and we're taking them back to Venezuela, or at least to El Salvador, where they might be extradited back to Venezuela at a later date. Currently, Donald Trump is going to pay $6 million to El Salvador to house 300 of these Venezuelan gang members. And furthermore, the Trump administration has promised to specifically go after Tren de Agua. So I find this last thing interesting, that we're going after Tren de Agua first, and not something like MS-13, which was kind of the big punching bag for a while. But I think this also has some international weight and some geopolitical weight, because we're trying to put more pressure on Venezuela to capitulate and stop being the ridiculous socialist backwater that should be the crown jewel of South America. But they refuse to do so because they have a dictator in charge, an actual dictator, mind you, and we're trying to deal with that in the best way we know how. So we're trying to save American citizens here with the Trump administration deporting these violent criminals underneath the Alien Enemies Act, and currently we have an activist judge trying to halt that progress. I am all for legal precedent. I am all for a good judicial review. But there comes a point where you have to start asking yourself, are certain things going a little bit too far? I think that this is going to find its way to the courts, and once again, I think the Trump administration will come out of this with the correct decision that the executive branch, underneath this law, can indeed import illegal non-citizens who have committed violent crimes in an organized fashion here in the United States. That's what I believe is going to happen, and currently it's happening. Thank you, Tom Homan, for doing your job, and these reporters, well, you might want to consult some lawyers fairly soon, because the legal advice that you're currently getting might be a little outdated. Folks, my name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed that segment here on Politibrawl. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one, and until then, y'all have a good one.